Last Tuesday morning, my son got his first buck, and we're going to be discussing a lot about that tonight, as well as, real freedom versus the freedom that comes in a bottle or a drug. And put that down. Also won my marriage annulment due to fraud against Holly on Friday, so that was quite the nice thing to get off my back, and so really glad to get that trial over with. Wanted to thank Bencze, David, Ted, Erin, Devon, Lee, and Andy D for their contributions over the last couple weeks while I was not here, and wanted to have a show last Tuesday, but it ended up falling through, and it's a good thing it did because my son and I were out early in the morning deer hunting, and we had been going out every morning for 8-9 days, and my son 7 o'clock in the morning last Tuesday, he got his very first buck, so had a lot to do, field dressing, skinning, butchering the deer. We had deer venison tenderloins for dinner that night, so it was a very big learning experience. I hadn't been deer hunting since I was 14, so my son actually got his first buck almost exactly 35 years to the day from when I got mine, also at 14. So that was a great experience, and wow, what a learning experience, learning how to field dress, how to skin, butcher everything, get it all ready for eating, talk about getting integrated with the animal, talk about true independence rather than going to the store and getting your meat out of a wrapper. You actually have to learn how to do everything yourself. So really good that my son was able to accomplish that, and he was pretty proud and got to eat something that he put on the table for the very first time. So that was pretty epic, but Hans called me night before last, and it was kind of synchronous because I was wanting to have Hans on. By the way, tonight is the 12th anniversary show, so 12 years, I guess tomorrow actually, since I started the show, but wow, 12 years of tons of research. This is Hans's 48th time on the show, I believe. So welcome back, Hans.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here. And yeah, no, I just called you randomly. I was just like, I said, hey, let me just say hi to Jan. So I did not have any ideation at all about this being the 12th anniversary show. And
I had mentioned it to you, a month and a half ago or so when you were on about having you on for the 12th anniversary.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure what that date was, but don't you have to buy? What's the 12th anniversary gift? Is it some kind of like ruby or something? Or
right? Well, yeah, or
something.
like an ounce of silver from each listener and a big donation tonight. Just kidding, but much appreciated for any support. But yeah, and thanks everyone. Yeah, it was so cool to see my son out there. But it's kind of fitting because our topic tonight, the Magical Mystery Tour, is going to coincide with the false freedom that they've been selling the public through drugs and through the music industry that you and I have done so much to expose for almost the last decade. It'll be a decade in January since you and I did our first show together. It's a long time. You and I have gotten a lot older in the last...
I did a lot of drugs in those past 10 years. I love it. Hanging out with Hunter and I, we get along great. And
who's Hunter?
Hunter Biden.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. You
likes,
should caveat that because someone will take you serious and edit that little clip. And
you're right. Caveat. That was That was I think a robust attempt at humor. I won't say
Right,
few,
right.
but
Well, there's always trolls and larpers out there that'll try and twist what we say, as you know. But yeah, I'm really proud of my son for putting food on the table for over a month. Proud dad here, and it's a lot different than the leftist pride. One of the seven deadly sins is they prayed about and who knows what in the streets of San Francisco and what all else for their pride, rather than actually accomplishing something and a major rite of passage for a boy becoming a man, etc. So let's dive in, Hans. I know you've got some PowerPoint slides to show and some audio and stuff. We just have to be careful with the copyright. They keep trying to ding my channel.
yeah, no, there's nothing. There's no music, and this is just kind of a starting off point. There's a lot more that can be done with this. I kind of a broad range. When I was looking for the lyrics for the song Magical Mystery Tour, I found out there's a podcast called Magical Mystery Tour with, I think Mark Devon was on it. I said, you know what? I didn't listen to it, so I thought I won't go so deep into the mystery tour. I will, but it's I'd like to have some like clips and da da da. But anyways, let's go ahead here and I'm gonna share my screen and now just feel free to dive in.
Sure.
This is ultimate PowerPoint I did here. Let's see. Okay. Share screen. Oh, you disabled screen sharing.
What's that?
You disabled screen sharing?
I did not.
It said host disabled screen sharing.
Um, Here, try that.
Okay. Okay, share screen. Let me see what the
Is it working?
share computer sound. Yep.
Yep. All right, cool.
Because that's
Yeah, I didn't change that setting. They must have done that out of the kindness of their hearts automatically.
yeah, man. I've been having
I just go ahead. You cut out for a second.
okay. Yeah, that was when I switched audio. I've been having weird stuff like where I send files and then if I'm on a different computer, I won't get the confirmation email, right? Even though it's sent to my account, open up the other computer, it's there. It's for Gmail. It's just all kinds of stuff like that. It gets on my nerves. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive in here and see if I can do full screen. And then, okay, so the Magic Bus, Dreamtime, Escape, and Virtualized Reality. So I thought I'd have some fun with this. So for me, it's fun for me. I don't know if it's fun for anyone else, but I don't care. So, anyways, well, you can just, go out and eat a hoagie or something. I don't know. Anyways, I'll get into what all these things mean, but we can kind of think about it. Dreamtime is I would say like the state of, we've almost been as a culture put into like a dreamlike landscape that's controlled from the outside. And so in a sense, the Beatles and the Magic Bus becomes almost the whole culture, right? The application, you'd say, of MKUltra, but also a lot of other techniques to start to remove like what you had with the deer, right? An actual experience. Escape is that desire. Well, I'm going to get on the bus because, I'm unhappy, or, I'm neurotic. I'm too fat. I'm too horny. I'm too old. I'm too young. Whatever you want to escape, right? And that idea of escape is premised or predicated on all the conditioning, right? And that goes to the super creepy children's songs. I got a whole vinyl collection of those. There's all kinds of weird stuff in those, for like the preschool kids. It just like, but that's one example, but just so many things, in the self-esteem movement, mental hygiene, all this stuff to make people think that there's something wrong with them, right? That fundamentally you are not capable of knowing your own mind, or you have to separate your own mind into uh, what you're supposed to be and what you're not supposed to be, etc. And so this, there's a big gap in a lot of people's lives. And one of the kind of the sad things is I think that a lot of people that are more free thinkers that probably could have a positive impact, are attracted and sort of drawn into things like the Grateful Dead, or this or that, or the
Psychedelic culture.
yeah. And there's a huge array of there's a lot of casualties, and we don't really know the full extent of that because
Well, Hans, it was what, a year and a half or two ago. I went to a Dead and Company show just to kind of observe things in hindsight after all of your and my shows together, and see things from the perspective of the destruction that you and I exposed, for instance, in our series Laying the Dead to Rest, and for that matter, Music, Mind Control, and Psychobiology. And just seeing all of the, thousands of decimated, wiped out hippies there going around seeking drugs and high and passed out everywhere, that could have really built something with their lives. And you and I have, done exactly a lot to expose that over the years.
yeah. And well, maybe we'll talk about this a bit later about the Deadhead murders. So a guy named Sean sent me a link to that. I was like, wow, so there's all these deadheads that have been murdered. There's a long kind of history of that. So we'll get back to that later. And then the last point is virtualized reality. Well, the dream time, I'm linking to primary psychologic, somewhat occult methods, and more like experiential stuff, whether it's drugs or, whatever it may be. Virtualized reality is the intersection of the computer, the electronic control network or control grid, and the voluntary acquiescence of many people on the planet to engage with the actual world, right? So, especially now, COVID, it's almost a forced thing, and they're going to start, doing these AI, private tutorial sessions for kids. So they're going to like learn with these AI bots. They're going to be recording all the biometric data and this and that, and this is already being developed. But that's it goes on and on, and but virtualized reality is where there's an electronic space. There is a virtual reality, but it's also seen as the way in, the way in or the way out, right? If anybody saw this, it was really hilarious, man. The virtual Burning Man. Have you seen it? They're wearing, the virtual reality glasses and walking around like these Lego people, And this guy did like live webcast, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, bro?" He's talking to his friends in his virtual, virtual online Burning Man, and he's like, "Well, it's great. I had like a terrible headache though wearing these things, and the headache's been lasting for like 3 days, but it's so much fun." But that's an example. I mean, could you imagine a festival and you're walking around like a Lego man in your virtual reality glasses, and this is fun? I mean, but people don't even recognize that disconnection anymore, right? They don't know what's in front of them. Okay, let's dive in. So, all aboard, right? The magic bus.
Well,
And
and just to make the connection, the Beatles did the Magical Mystery Tour, an hour-long movie back in, the 60s, which was completely awful. And then who did it first? Was it Ken Kesey and his bus, or was it the Beatles and their bus?
the Beatles, the movie was made or was released in 1967. And so the Merry Pranksters they started prior to that. And, but you don't know exactly when it was written. Obviously, it is a reference to Kesey's bus, right?
Right.
And, and so, was there a cross pollination? There's a space for more interest, right? But I just wanted to call to mind that there are a lot of songs about buses too, like Magic Bus, of course, by the Who, etc. And this image of being on the bus, right? You're on the bus or you're off the bus. right? You are on the bus, which means, you know, you are you've made that choice, and the choice you may not be able to come back from, but it looks really fun, right? At the time, it seemed really fun. Where people, all the acid casualties left along the roadside, with Ken Kesey or etc. But hey, these guys are great. Um, so I'm using the bus as a metaphor for culture, ethos, right? Ethos, we can say that, and all that's implied with ethos, and worldview, etc. Um, so one thing's interesting, and these are a lot of times these are school buses, right? So if you're going to hypothetically think of something that's really cool, the magic airplane, the magic train, right? I mean, riding on a bus is not, my most wonderful experience, generally speaking. I did have an awesome sleeper bus in India. It was like a 15-hour bus ride, but it turned out to be, you had like a bed and a compartment. It was great, but it turned out to be infested by cockroaches, so that wasn't so great. But but so what do you think it's a school bus, right? So you're in the school bus, you're sitting on the bus. I don't know if if anyone listening or you, Jan, have been on, taking the school bus. You go out there, you wait in the morning. If you're an adult and do that, it's kind of creepy. But as a kid, that whole ritual of going and getting on the school bus, and you're being taken away from your home, and you're being, in a sense, your will is now the will of the state to a certain extent, right? Or your mind, right? So you're there to have your mind shaped, conditioned, hopefully educated along the way. But the school bus, again, it's like a kid, right? It's not like even a voluntary thing. You have to be on the bus. You have to go to school. Okay. So driver's in control, right? You don't have any autonomy really about where you're going. They're going to stop where they decide to stop. Obviously at least for the school bus, you end up at the school. But, if you go along for the ride, either with the culture of narcissism, the cult of totally believing everything the government says, the social conformity aspect. But when you make those decisions, right, you're along for the ride. You've kind of linked
Well,
yourself.
and let me interject there. The people who get on that proverbial bus think that they are going for freedom and not going for what the government says. They don't grasp that this whole thing, this whole drug-induced psychedelic counterculture, etc., is the MKULTRA program, and it's not freeing them. It's causing hypersuggestion to control them. So it's the exact opposite of what they believe it is. And it's like Jonathan just said in the chat, it's the Pied Piper syndrome.
Yeah, it's a Pied Piper. And it's also the.
Can you speak up just a little bit
Oh,
there?
sure, absolutely. And maybe I can let me check my sound here real quick.
I think you're just a little bit far back there.
Okay, yeah, I got my reclining chair, just kind of about ready to fall asleep. You're looking at all these. I built all these sound panels, so.
Are you trying to build the wall of sound like Stanley Osley and those guys?
Well, no, I'm building 3 isolation rooms, including a drum room, putting in a bunch of windows. So I'm basically doing all the remodeling myself. And these are just these, they can cost some of them cost like $500, like the bass traps, and just use rock wool insulation and some Lewin or plywood. Here you go. But
well,
anyways,
and just really quickly, MK says it's like bicycle day. It's like learning to ride a bike. They're taking you on a ride, and that's exactly right. But the whole bicycle day thing, which I've exposed in my research, is a fraud too. It appears that Albert Hofmann did not invent LSD. That Arthur Stoll, his boss at Sandoz, invented LSD, and they passed the invention of LSD over to Albert Hofmann to cover up 20 years of human experimentation. So, if LSD was invented, what did they say, 1936 or 38 or whatever it was, if it was invented here, then they have a good cover for the 20 prior years of human experimentation that they had done with it.
yeah. Well, and another thing about the driver's in control. So say the driver's in control for you've joined the counterculture. You're dropping a lot of acid, just like your idol John Lennon, right? He used to put liquid LSD on his Cheerios or cornflakes or whatever, his whatever they eat in England. But yeah, on his breakfast cereal. But also supposedly, did all these people take as many drugs as they purported to have taken?
Correct.
You know,
That's a really good point. They were probably did not, and it was probably just like we had talked about in the past with Tim Leary and these guys. They probably just sold that image to the public, and like Terrence McKenna, heroic doses and all of this nonsense. And it turns out he never even did that, and he hadn't done mushrooms in like 12 years because he did like a gram one day and had a bad trip.
yeah. And if you're in the drug sort of counterculture scene, and I want to distinguish this from like here in Ohio, it's just awful. The fentanyl, meth stuff. I mean, I'm people I know personally are dying. I mean, well, and it's rampant. It's unbelievable, man. So that's a different kind of a drug culture. But it's sort of the psychedelic, that kind of culture had a sense of you're kind of part of an elite, right? That was promoted. Timothy Leary, you're part of humanity's elite. You're going to change the world. But, when you get a certain percentage of the population that has gone into these states of high suggestibility, of programming, of possible involuntary occultic initiation, you start to get a critical mass to change society. And especially so if a lot of those people end up being university professors, politicians, whatever, you know what I mean? Or, in the media. So that influence is there. So it's a way of shaping and transforming culture and a way of disrupting the existing cultural space. I'm going to play a clip, of Owsley, describing, just going and disrupting these small towns, and also Jerry talking about just going to small town America and basically, creating huge schisms, right? I mean, just really freaking out. We're talking these small communities, and really having a profound influence.
Well,
And right?
And I actually spoke. I was chatting with this guy Joshua today on Facebook, last name Z, and he could not believe. Well, first of all, he said, "Well, psychedelics were outlawed, so therefore they couldn't have been promoting them to the youth." And of course, I've showed Tim Leary's congressional testimony where he went to Congress requesting LSD and psychedelics outlaw, and then immediately after the drugs were outlawed, that's what kicked off the Summer of Love. But his whole argument was that the notion that Timothy Leary and these psychedelic gurus promoted psychedelics to the youth, what Leary called juvenilization and also pediommorphosis, couldn't have been real. And it's like, well, we didn't see them showing up at senior centers, trying to get people in their, late 80s and 90s onto psychedelic drugs, and we didn't see them putting those people on the bus. We saw them intentionally targeting the youth.
Yeah, and let's look at, Leary. Again, I've sort of been collecting a few stories here and there, and I talked to some people that are old boomers or whatever, and they know people in the 60s and 70s that took LSD once and were permanently screwed up the rest of their lives. And I've seen that in the ayahuasca daime stuff. And so, it's one of those things where, look, you can drink. Yeah, if you drink a whole, if you're never drank before, you drink a fifth of whiskey, you may die of alcohol poisoning, but you're not going to lose your mind permanently. You could smoke so much weed, you'll fall asleep. Okay, you can overdose on heroin and cocaine, but those are chemical, those are simply body's tolerance. You can die from drinking too much water. And I'm not saying heroin and cocaine are better, but LSD is something where you take a regulated dose, and it's almost worse than physically dying if you're permanently insane the rest of your life, right? You know, and I've this has been absolutely suppressed. Just like I've been trying to, kind of warn people a bit about the Daime Church, and I've talked about this on the air, with all the spirit possession stuff, but it's so hard. These stories are scrubbed, right? Japan murders, Brazil murders, United States murders. Those stories are nowhere to be found. And the only stuff I could even track down were anecdotal stories like in forums and stuff, right? But they are promoting that big time, right? This is, cures depression, miraculous healing effects, this. Well, you know what? If you're taking an antidepressant and you take that stuff without getting it out of your system, goodbye, potentially for good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And this stuff is absolutely dangerous. And it's everyone knows that heroin and cocaine or even alcohol are potentially fatal, but how many people know that these psychedelics are fatal, but they're not fatal to your body?
They're fatal to your brain.
mind,
Right.
to your brain.
Well, and let me read a couple of quotes here, because, and this is from Dr. Timothy Leary, who is, of course, an admitted CIA agent. But he says, from Koestler, I learned about juvenilization, the theory that evolution occurs not in the adult final form of a species, but in the juveniles, larvals, adolescents, pre-adults. The practical conclusion, if you want to bring about mutations in a species, work with the young. Koestler's teaching about pediomorphosis prepared me to understand the genetic implications of the 60s youth movement and its rejection of the old culture. Now, let me read you this quote from Marlene Dobkin de Rios that I had on. Yeah?
Do you mind? I just want to interject, man. That is, I may have heard that before. That is an extremely powerful quote. That's, again, I just want to reiterate this. You may have heard this 1,000 times. I'm like your dad, but basically, pediomorphosis. This is changing the human genetic code. And I remember I was doing my ethnomusicology and trying to talk about, these families that go 7, 8, 10, 15 generations of intensive training in music, starting from the womb. And I said, there is a genetic thing that can be passed down. And I got, no, you can't say that. That's not possible. Well, there's a lot of stuff, and there was research before it was verboten, because of the political correctness or whatever, that actual genetic changes can be passed down to your children, or they can be passed down intergenerationally and show up 2 or 3 a generation later.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? And so that is exactly what I was trying to say. And I've never heard that. And that is, they're talking about literal mutations, literal pediomorphosis. This is not a metaphor, right? This is not metaphoric. This is factual. Go ahead, Jan.
All right. So this is from Professor Marlene Dobkin de Rios. She was one of the key people who promoted ayahuasca back in the day. About 9 years ago or so, I interviewed her on the show regarding her book, Ayahuasca, A Tea Laced in Controversy. And I think before she died of cancer, she was a professor of anthropology at Cal State Fullerton, and then she went on to be associate professor of psychology or psychiatry at UC Irvine. But she goes on here to say, psychedelic substances like ayahuasca create a state of hypersuggestibility in which persons are very open to being influenced by others. Not freedom, folks, being influenced by others. Many traditional cultures have utilized this condition to inculcate cultural values and behaviors in young people as they receive initiation into adulthood. In the West, countercultural values can be inculcated in young people when using these psychedelics, especially when using them in an antinomian context. And, so what is key here is that word antinomian. Antinomian means of or relating to the view that Christians are released by grace from the obligation of observing the moral law. So what do we have? We have people getting on the bus, to bring it full circle. We have people following the Pied Piper at the Woodstock festivals. And interestingly, the signs outside of Woodstock, New York, which is actually in Bethel, New York, actually have the Pied Piper as you're entering into the Woodstock area. It's no longer a farm there. They've turned it into a huge museum and memorial for rock music. But they have the Pied Piper right outside there, going back to, I think it was Jonathan's point earlier. And then, so what we see, though, beginning with Woodstock and these other music festivals, etc., is people then going out and fornicating in the mud like swine to their rock idols or their graven images. And so you're literally collapsing the society from, within, and then you're promoting it as freedom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, antinomian also, I mean, it has, that's the original meaning of the term, but it has a kind of a broader sense. There is a broader sense of kind of a broader do what thou wilt, but also it is fundamentally this idea of reversing, of inverting, it's different from shattering. That's what I want to stress. It's sort of like an opposite, right? It's kind of a boomerang effect. It's like a mirror image. So you're not, well, just this is not a correct example, but say you're not destroying marriage. You're promoting people to become swingers while they're married, right?
Well,
that's antinomian. But so you know what I mean? So that's why it's especially deadly or devious.
well, let me read this, and of course, this is a shout out to Chris Mayville and Morgana, who's actually in the chat tonight. Thanks for the show intros that we played for many years, and you all will know this one. This is from MKULTRA engineer, architect Aldous Huxley. Epsilon singing, "No more mammy, no more pappy. Ain't we lucky? Ain't we happy? Everybody's oh so happy. Everybody's happy now. Sex galore, but no more marriages. No more pushing baby carriages. No one has to change a nappy. Ain't we lucky? Ain't we happy? Everybody's happy now. Dope for tea and dope for dinner. Fun all night and love and laughter. No remorse, no morning after. Where's the sin and who's the sinner?" Speaking of antinomian. Everybody's happy now. Girls pneumatic, girls exotic, girls ecstatic, girls erotic. Hug me, baby. Make it snappy. Everybody's oh so happy. Everybody's happy now. Lots to eat and hours for drinking. Soma cocktails. No more thinking. No more thinking. No more thinking. Everybody's happy now. And of course, that's from Aldous Huxley, from Letters of Aldous Huxley. And that's letter number 757, published in 1969, page 809. Again, Letters of Aldous Huxley.
Yeah. Well, no, that's absolutely, right. It's very interesting. And I'm just going to just read a little bit of this. This is an account when I think of this, because I really think, though, that, we do have to have the compassion that this is promoted by the society, right? This is promoted. It is promoted. It's culture promoted as, you've got people with status and authority, like Tim Leary, who's a Harvard psychologist, like Ram Dass, Richard Alpert. You have people.
I think it's Ram Dass, but go ahead. Dick Ram Dass.
But and then again, look at, there's very little on the negative effects. And when it's there, it's usually, oh, these people are, this is like, they're too old, or these are like fuddy-duddies, or these are like, hopeless conservatives. But let me just get into this. So there's a whole bunch. I did find it. You guys checked out webcrawler.com. It's a great search engine. And so I searched on Google, nothing, but I got a bunch here. So
well, I remember Webcrawler from way back in the day.
It still works, man. I searched myself on Webcrawler, found a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't seen for like years on the internet compared to Google. It's kind of
Google is absolutely terrible. I hope nobody uses that crap anymore.
Yeah. So I'll kind of just jump a little bit around this, but I'll read some of this. So if you're reading this, then you're probably like me, a seeker. I too was searching for a solution to my low self-esteem, my spiritual curiosity. It all started when I met a dating coach who on the surface seemed like a chilled out, normal guy in a happy relationship. I want what he's got, I thought. I heard through the grapevine he did ayahuasca and DMT ceremonies. and that was the secret to his success. What's DMT? I naively asked. Little did I, okay, you know. So anyways, you can see, people go seeking, right? I mean, my brother was trying to get me to go there for health reasons. He, and unfortunately my brother is passed away. So he's another casualty. Not necessarily directly from that, but it's really, so I feel very personally about this. People think I'm getting emotional. I mean, it's, so, I mean, I know people close to me.
I've every friend that I've had that was a big deadhead and a big burner is now dead.
Yeah. Well, anyways, so I'll continue. So, like many people, I started Googling. I found out DMT is the psychoactive component in ayahuasca,
Correct.
a supposed plant medicine cure for various sicknesses such as depression, anxiety, and heroin. I'm addicted to heroines. I'm just kidding. You spelled heroin like you spelled the female, whatever. But as a work addict, okay. So took a businessman trip. Now we just go down here. Beginning of a living hell. I went home that night feeling a bit confused. As I walked home, the patterns on the pavements and drains really stood out. It was a bit overwhelming. The next morning, however, patterns on things like my floorboard felt really strange. So this is the next day. So what we're seeing is it should have worn off, right? You do a couple hits. DMT is supposed to last for a short period of time.
5, 10, 12 minutes tops.
Yep. Okay. I tried to ignore it. Suddenly, I felt like I was having, I started having what felt like an anxiety attack. I had never had one before. But basically, next day she's still tripping. I began to experience what is known as DPDR, known as depersonalization, derealization. That is where there's so much panic in the nervous system that the body starts releasing opioids into your system because it thinks you're about to die. So life feels very dreamlike. Okay. And I won't continue with that narrative, but it goes on and on. But this person, they never came down. They never came down. And think about that. This dreamlike state that goes into the dream time and the virtual reality. And could that even become genetically transferred or even the potential for that experience?
And on top of that, okay, so in the ayahuasca brews, one of the components that is often included is datura or scopolamine. And that's scopolamine is and I'm just pulling this up, it's an incapacitating compound. And scopolamine causes extreme hypersuggestibility. So to put it into context, if you were dosed unwittingly, or even wittingly for that matter, by scopolamine, and there's been instances of this going on in Colombia, etc. Somebody could blow the dust of pure scopolamine in your face, and then they could they could pull up a truck in front of your house and tell you to load up the truck with all of your own stuff. You would go do it, and the next day you would have no recollection of doing it. And they would fully rob you in your place. You would never remember a thing about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, scopolamine, that's kind of like the zombie drug or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah, they blow the dust and,
But a lot of the ayahuasca brews actually include scopolamine, and that's from datura or, Jimson devil's weed.
Yeah, I've unfortunately had datura. I was in India back in the day. They have a thing called bhang, which is just, a kind of ganja preparation. It's like these little green balls. And you take it usually, and it's really, like, I'm sure you can get really strong ones, but this was like some 10-year-old kid, would show up at the chai stall and it's like 1 rupee wrapped in a leaf. So, normally you take one, it's just very light buzz. I took a couple and I was staying in this house and then, I started understanding their language and I thought they were going to come up and kill me. And I was like understanding what they're saying. And I was like watching a movie on the wall. And then I ended up climbing out the window with all my bags. I'm like, I said, I'm really high. I came back down, but that was datura. Datura is a really intense hallucinogen. And it's scopolamine, I think, is a derivative, But
Yeah,
and,
datura, scopolamine is the active chemical in datura.
yeah, but the fact is that suggestibility is a big part of it. But I think what's even worse is the breakdown of the categories in your mind, especially if you have low self esteem, if you're not connected to yourself and your life, if you have sort of depression, emotional conditions that you can't access your own self to really know what you're feeling. Um, and there may be trauma, maybe this, that. So it's kind of like if you look at the mind, like the MKUltra programming, right? So they have all these different alters, all these different altered personalities, and they're set up in rooms, right? They're all in these different rooms, and then they have different trigger words to bring up that altered personality. And they have these cube grids. Now I can't say 100% this factual, but this is what's been said about the program. And they have these cube grids where they'll split it up in all these different fractured personalities, and this is actually based on the Kabbalah, which is quite interesting. Um, and so there's a lot of reputable stuff on this. It's not just BS, right? There's some stuff, during the Satanic Panic, you have some very qualified people discussing patients they're dealing with. So that's another part of that, is to create these kind of fractured personalities, and basically to lose your way so much in your own mind, you can never get back out. And that's what happened to that poor woman. We just,
Well, and then if you look at MKUltra architect Aldous Huxley's books, such as Doors of Perception and things like that, he's telling people to stop thinking, stop using your five senses, the exact opposite of the trivium, for instance. Shut off all of the five senses and only believe what you see in this drug-induced primacy of consciousness world that is created by the drugs that the CIA and MKUltra were selling and promoting to the youth. And so, and Jiddu Krishnamurti had a quote in his stuff. Let me just see if I can find it here. He said, knowledge helping man to ascend seems so utterly nonsense to me. And of course, Jiddu Krishnamurti was the false Christ that they wanted to present to the world, and he was good friends with Aldous Huxley. But it was all about shutting off critical thinking, shutting off perception and understanding of the world, and going with this mirror image of it that you said, doing the exact opposite, going with this antinomian world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and believing that that is reality and that that is your freedom rather than freedom itself. And when you and I had spoken on the phone yesterday or day before, you had mentioned the 10 directions. Are you ready to cover that?
yeah. You want me to kind of blast through this? I'll get in
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Okay. So, actually, it's cool. This kind of what, you have so many great points. So it's like, I don't do all this work, but anyways, so the Magic Theater of the Mind, right? That's for madmen only. It's in the book Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, which was a profound influence on the philosophy, the mythology of the counterculture, right? And this is actually referenced directly in the Magical Mystery Tour. But the Magical Theater of the Mind, again, for madmen only, is this other dimension. This is, and shown as the way for the risk takers who are willing to go into this state or this space.
Well,
And of course, oh yeah, go ahead.
sorry, and the Beatles even state in the Magical Mystery Tour, in the film version, that they are casting a spell. There's this little segment where they're all dressed in wizard or wizard type costumes, and they say that they're casting a spell.
Yeah, and we'll hit the actual movie in a second here. But with the film, what's interesting is you watch it, it just starts off as this really crappy vanity movie, right? And then But there's when they go into, and that's, that's when the LSD would be hitting too. If you take an LSD when you're watching in the theater, there's some really, really, really dark stuff in there that makes you put everything else in a context. But it's in a certain way, it's invisible. It goes directly to your subconscious because things that are terrifying can be blocked out of your subconscious. And when I watched the film again, when I was a kid, they used to show like Yellow Submarine, Magical Mystery Tour, at like the local community center, at the the science museum. You go there and sit there and watch these Beatles movies. Oh, these are great for like 5, 6 year old kids. You know, but and so then seeing that again, I was like, whoa, there was something that was done to me watching that movie, or at least I could not get those images out of my mind for a couple days. But anyways, back to the PowerPoint, and I'll try not to talk too fast. I know I just get so excited about life, but I do actually. Life is great. But childhood, use of generational symbolic conditioning, which is what I just referenced, but you basically look at generations. They're mapped out and you create different movements. For different personality types, you create different segments. You create different relational and relative cultural symbols, symbols for identity, media, other things. And these things form the basis for people's personalities that is something that we're not really, I think we're probably come to terms with it now. But if you look for 99% of human history or more, the child was shaped in the environment of the family or the extended family. Or, maybe if, you're an orphan, you're a little orphan Annie, then you're in an orphanage, you're like a child slave or whatever. But there was not this massive external influencing the most intimate parts of people's minds as the parents become the me generation, or even earlier, no longer are really connected with their children. And it's a burden. It's not the most important role and responsibility you probably have in your natural lifetime is to raise your children. And it's maybe the most difficult, but it's fundamentally the most rewarding. Okay. And then, as I already mentioned, once you're on, you can't get off.
So with this scenario, up until maybe 100 years ago, there was a few things that most people did in life. You were probably a farmer and or a hunter and or an apprentice of some sort as a child, and you were taught in a specific trade that went down generationally. And you followed that trade. Now, trades and apprenticeships have pretty much disappeared in the last century. But these things taught skills of independence. Whereas today, everything is based on dependence, where everybody is domesticated. So most people don't know how to go out and source their own food. They think that food comes from a wrapper at the grocery store. And if the grocery stores collapse tomorrow, if they shut off the food supply, most people would go into a panic and wouldn't know how to get food. If you did kill the food, how would you get it from the dead animal to your table? How would you skin and butcher the animal? Most people today don't have this knowledge. And, going out there and learning all of this over the last week and a half or two with my son brought it all back from childhood when I used to go out, and do this stuff when I got my own deer at 14. But now it's brought it back fresh into my mind. Yes, I can do this. Yes. And it's so instinctual when you get out there and you're actually doing it. You become, people are so, well, I couldn't handle the blood and guts and blah, blah, blah. Actually, yes, you can. It might bother you for the first 5 or 10 minutes, but then you become so one with the animal that you're preparing to feed yourself and your family with that the blood and stuff no longer even phases you. You're just so busy learning and getting intimate with this animal, learning how to to cut it, and following the different lines of the muscle and what becomes different cuts of meat, and pulling off the sinew and this stuff, and it pulls you back to reality, to where humans came from for thousands of years before this century, and especially since 1938 with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and this whole blueprint for that it became for MKUltra. So it's really refreshing, and I think for people that are interested, I think it's something that I'm interested in pursuing, as far as like teaching people how to do those specific things again, so that we can get pulled back into reality.
Yeah, and just on that tip, and I'm gonna go back to the slides here. I didn't show that last one, but yeah, and look at, we're talking about culture, and look at, say, the movie like The Deer Hunter or Deliverance, right? I mean, what did that do to make people that go out in the woods and hunt? It basically created this image of these, these demonic or retarded, rednecks or this or that, and made it something fearful or scary, right? How many horror movies are set in the woods or in small towns, right? So, and these things can have a tremendous influence, especially if you're not, you're not sort of raised in that culture. Okay, we'll just skip ahead here. And, but anyways, so that's the last thing, the magic theater of the mind. But again, like Steppenwolf, the band, right? Easy Rider, all these symbolic things fit together with the whole 60s, 1967, the 13 year, right? And then how that exactly ended. And it was like a mythological process, right? The hero's journey, except for in this case, the hero ended up as either, this totally self-centered, 1970s kind of self-help me generation. Oh, I'm gonna leave my wife and kids and go find myself, or I'm gonna leave my husband and kids and go live on a commune, or or else totally burned out, or else a heroin junkie or dead. And they started to change the composition of the LSD. You see that at Woodstock with the really bad acid that was given at Woodstock, and then at the end of the 60s, right, the mythical end with Altamont, with the ritual sacrifice. There you have the really bad acid, STP, right? This stuff is, it's just intense, like psychosis, and people are taking huge amounts of it because it has a longer onset time. So there you go. But anyways, this is from Decode, Encode, Engage. So these are methodologies of influencing and shaping culture through the media, which sort of came through advertising. But Swen Hughes, he's not just targeting the audiences, he's targeting people's minds. Decode, encode, engage. And this decode, engage technique, verbalization technique also, they can show significant changes in the target population within a period of 24 hours. So this is a type of messaging or media, whatever context it's put in. It could be music. It could be a movie like Magical Mystery Tour. And so this model goes from advertising to information warfare. And I'll just read a quote, Swen Hughes. A weaponized narrative is a form of non-kinetic warfare that seeks to undermine an opponent's supporters' identity and will. It is messaging that generates confusion or political and social schisms that are in line with the creator's tactical and strategic aims. It is language that is designed to create specific perception and behavior change to help one side against the other. Doesn't that sound a bit like the 1960s counterculture?
Yeah. Well, what's funny is Autumn just mentioned in the chat I'll survive, but if it gets like The Walking Dead, there's no point of survival. And that's kind of what we're getting at here. The deadheads are The Walking Dead. They're the people who are gratefully dead. They are under a drug induced coma and they've lost their sense of direction. And the Bible breaks down the dead, those who are dead in mind and have lost the truth.
Yeah. And, just to, amplify that, I mean, but I think, I'll get to all, we can go over an hour, right? You're not trying to keep this an hour, are you?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Cause I got all night, man. Cause I told my wife it's anniversary with Jan. He's getting me, emerald cufflinks or something.
I thought you were getting me emerald cufflinks. What happened?
No, dude, I know it's my anniversary with you. So you have to get, you're the leader, right? I'm the guest. So the guest is, I would say, the feminine role. So I would say that the gift goes for the wife. I mean, to the husband, or whatever. Okay, that was a little confusing, and that's what it's supposed to be, right? But anyway, so decoding is the transmission side. So you decode. I'm sorry, encoding. I had that out of order. I'm sorry. So encode is where you encode your message into a specific medium, whether television, film, book, political presentation, whatever it may be. Then the receiver decodes that, which means that they translate that input into their own thought stream and their own structure, right? So their own mental structure. And then the engage is sort of the little spin, right? Because encode, decode are normal kind of communication theory terms, but the engage part is, we'll get to it in a minute, is really where it's used to start to shape and transform society. Okay, and moving on. And by the way, the books, I had a couple people order books. I'm getting another printing because the cheapo printer I had just did a really horrible job. So if anyone was waiting, just letting you know.
Get yourself an HP printer. They're awesome.
Okay. I can print out books. Can I bind them?
Well, it'll do, I have an HP laser printer that I bought like 10 years ago, and it prints both sides, and it'll print a whole book in like 8-10 minutes.
So, but to sell to somebody? Okay, well, I try.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do that, you should probably go to Lulu or
yeah,
Amazon, whatever the hell it's called or something.
Yeah, it's almost like $20 for a hardcover, one for the author's cut. That's expensive, man. But so I thought about making it myself, with like raw hide or something. But anyways, so we'll get back to the magical mystery tour here. So, and I'll just honestly, like, there are some pretty innovative and interesting songs in this movie. It's a very interesting audio production, for the movie. But the roll up for the mystery tour, and I'm not going to try to sing it. I guess I could sing it, but I'm not feeling the Beatles mood to sing right now. But it's the magical mystery tour. Roll up for the mystery tour. And this is when the Beatles are transitioning, right, from the lovable mop tops into the psychedelic gurus. And this happened in very short span of time, but, we see that same model again and again and again. All the Disney kids, Miley Cyrus, on and on and on. They start out as a certain thing. They're warped. They're changed into something else. And it's usually targeted people at 12, 13, 14 years old, and then by the time they're 16, 17, their idol has started changing. And just when they're most, go ahead.
Do you think there's any coincidence with Paul McCartney's death and the bringing in of Billy Shears at that point as his replacement?
Well, I to be honest, like, I haven't really gotten into the whole Paul is dead thing. But yeah, Paul, there's like, for example, in the last scene of the movie, where they're walking down this huge, stairway, and everyone's
Right.
wearing formal gowns. Paul has a black rose. Everyone else has red roses. There's a number of hints in that. The walrus was Paul and all this and that. So there's
and the new Paul, Billy Shears, was about 6 or 8 inches taller than Paul McCartney as well.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not, I'm neither confirming nor denying that, but it is interesting, and it would go along with all of this idea of reversal, right? Writing things backwards, having these kind of deceptions or perceptual things where, and that's part of the sleight of hand. It's also part of magic itself with a K in the Crowleyan sense. And so, and so there's all kinds of ritualistic aspects of this. And maybe one day I'll go over all the numerology and all the dates of all this stuff. It's really, there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's looks to me like this stuff was thought up probably in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, even into the early 60s, and then deployed. I don't think this whole 60s counterculture thing just, they just thought it up like in like 1965. Hey, let's promote hippies. I think it was a long time coming, at least on a conceptual level.
Correct.
But anyways, so with the movie, like I said, it begins just kind of inane jokes and just just kind of silly stuff, and these guys, they're just goofing off, and these guys are so lovable and just such fun guys. And yeah, this movie looks like it's, I like the Beatles, but this movie just looks like it's just crap, right? But there are a lot of symbols, in which I trace through the movie, which I don't think we'll get to that today. Just because I don't want to show film clips and all that, but there's a number of symbols that appear in the beginning that clue in, and these are things that are flashed just for a few seconds, but they target the mind when it goes into this sort of dark programming phase of the film. These symbolic references are there, but you really have to watch like frame by frame to see that. But absolutely, that subliminal messaging is there. But there's all other kinds of symbolism as well, right? And some of it, again, it's that idea of humor. This is just silly. We're just a bunch of lovable mop tops, and and they're wizards. Oh, we're just the wizard, and Paul has a red nose too, right? That's another lots thing with Paul. But Paul has a red nose, but it morphs into, like with George Harrison, and when they enter the magical theater of the mind, George Harrison's song goes into really disturbing footage, even frame by frame, like kids dancing around in circles wearing masks and all kinds of stuff that it may have had an effect on me when I was a kid, because like I said, I was like, whoa. It really hit me. And I said I could not get the images out of my mind for like days, and I'm not really like a big visualizer. But anyways, and so, George Harrison, again, he's the really nice Beatle. He's the spiritual Beatle. He's the gentle guy. He's the teddy bear. He's not wild like the other guys, But in this film, he does play the role of the dark sorcerer. And in a sense, the Beatles were cultural sorcerers, right? They were weaving magic spells that transformed Western society permanently. And we're living right now. This is real time. That this is what this was working towards. We're on our way there. I don't want to say how close we are. I'm trying to be real upbeat and positive, but it could be, could be like next week, man, or next year, but it's here. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny that this stuff, even what I said about Pokemon Go, and then you have your contract tracing apps based off of that, da, da, da. I mean, everything we talked about is manifesting real time in front of everybody. And so, anyways, move on. Unless you want to chime in there.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just trying to get through this here. So, and just the lyrics, roll up. That's an invitation. Roll up for the mystery tour. Roll up to make a reservation. Roll up for the mystery tour. So obviously a double entendre, right? Roll your joint up, be rolled up in the carpet, thrown in a ditch, roll up your joint, take your drugs, whatever that's there, of course. Magical Mystery Tour is coming to take you away. Coming to take you away. So it's actually, within the song, in the context of the whole movie, with the subliminal programming, Coming to Take You Away takes on a very different type of resonance, because look at all the people that, it was, well, I mean, I know people like this, we probably all do. Maybe we've been like that ourselves where, oh, man, if you want to really expand your mind, put on The Wall. I know these guys, that were on a military, they're in the military, and they used to like take acid and, and listen to Pink Floyd, The Wall, like every night or almost every night. What is that doing to your brain, man? I don't even want to think. But the Beatles, same thing, right? It's promoted as like, oh, this is like this expansion. And within that dreamtime state of the LSD experience, the Beatles, like Hendrix or some of these other things, you can go into that trip state where suddenly the song becomes like this 3-4 dimensional world, right? So that's there, right? That experience is there. And I would posit that to a certain extent, this was understood, some of the effects of the music would have to create these kind of experiences. The last one, the Magical Mystery Tour, is Dying to Take You Away. Dying to Take You Away, take you today. So, dying to take you away, right? Like the walrus in Lewis Carroll's poem, this idea of the sacrifice, also of the even the listener, right? The listener who's not part of the beautiful people, the listener who's just some pimply face, high school dork, but decides to trip and watch the movie. So they almost become, this walrus-like creature, right, in their own perception of themselves. And then so there's sort of a symbolic murder of this thing. And then so look at these funny, happy masks. What do you think, Jan? They look a bit creepy or not?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You notice,
Absolutely.
and Paul is wearing the black fur coat, and then look at George, right? George is, that looks like something out of a medieval painting, right? Of hell or something. It's so yeah. So you can see when that's actually it's kind of a creepy picture, man. I wouldn't take my 5-year-old to see that, but anyways, um, so lots of symbolism, which, I won't get into all of it, but we can see, George Harrison, multiplying all these different numbers and colors, and these symbolic realms that are brought into the encoding process, right? So in this case, the encoding is encoding to change your mind and potentially push you into a different kind of a space, perhaps a very negative space, um, and potentially to seal parts of yourself off, right? These walls of fear or anxiety associated sometimes with the breakdown of personality with psychedelic experiences can create psychic walls that can be almost impossible to jump over or move behind, right? Because there's so much connected with them. It's just, you just want to make it subconscious. Um, there's the Eggman. There we have John Lennon, the Eggman, which is also kind of a weird thing with the white head. Of course, the egg, fragile egg, right? Humpty Dumpty stood on a wall. They're standing on a wall, not in this picture, but so there's your mind, shattering the fragile eggshell mind, right? As Jim Morrison says, go shatter the child's fragile eggshell mind. Um, and here's John Lennon. So there's a scene, he's on the bus with this like little girl, maybe 5-6 years old, sitting on his lap. It's a bit of a weird, awkward scene. It's something that probably today wouldn't fly. It's not, it's a little creepy, but he's
Yeah.
also wearing this
And
hat
he's
with,
demanding that she guess what her present is or something.
yep. And look at the hat he's wearing with the two devil horns and the heart in between, right? Um, so that's John's hat there when he's on the bus. Um, um, and then I think I'm almost at the end here. So, and hygiene of the mind, right? So,
I'm just
I
going to
would,
check for something. Keep going.
yeah, sure. And Jan, if you want to, I can take a little break. You can go ahead and dive in, man, if you want to, or I can just, yeah, as you like.
Oh, no, I was just grabbing a book here from Thomas Hou Harriet. The memoirs of Billy Shears, which I recommend people check out, but that's a whole other discussion that we can go into. But I tried to get Thomas Harriet on the show, but he was only willing to go on Mark Devlin's show or something like that at the time.
Huh. Yeah, I unfortunately I haven't really been following this stuff, so I'm probably like, I'm like coming out of the closet. It's like
I would recommend doing a couple of days worth of research on the Paul McCartney, Billy Shears thing. There is a substantial amount of evidence to support it, and there was an Italian forensic team probably 10, 15 years ago that had looked at the two from a forensic standpoint, and they had also concluded that there was no way that the two were the same people.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with a lot of the basic stuff, like the car crash,
Right.
and then of course Billy Shears actually being a much better musician. Um, but yeah, it is one of those things like I'll have to look into it. It's kind of one of those, you know, here's me saying this, but it's kind of like a hot button issue almost in terms of like it's like for some people, oh, there's only two genders, or 9/11 or 9/11.
XX and XY, sorry.
Yeah, 9/11 was an inside job, or whatever. That's almost like, oh, that person believes
Oh,
that
you're a conspiracy theorist.
and that's one of those conspiracy theorists, like, and they use some of these things, right? Even that famous Cass Sunstein thing about this, he lists these conspiracy theories, and he includes one like sunlight is good for you. Thanks, Cass. But he goes, these conspiracy theories, and so, and I will definitely look into it. I just don't want to like, say yay or nay until I've actually done enough research. So it's like, well, I thought Hans was legit, but I think he thinks Paul is dead, man. Whatever. But so so hygiene of the mind, right? So mental hygiene, which is a really big topic, but mental hygiene that ties into pedomorphosis also.
Pediomorphosis, correct.
Pediomorphosis type.
Pediomorphosis.
Yeah, no. What I said, a similar meaning. It probably has a different shade of meaning. So,
Oh, okay.
because I was saying like actually changing form. So,
Okay.
yeah, because morph, form, etc. But anyways, so this idea of hygiene of the mind, right? This is programmed into UNESCO. It's programmed into so many social and cultural programs. It's programmed into so much reconditioning, psychotherapy, electroshock therapy, human experimentation, on and on and on and on and on, right? But Thomas Closton of Edinburgh, some time ago, coined, this is what he said, he coined the term, without hygiene of the mind, every social system among men and women, would fall to pieces. So I left out the word fall, maybe because of Paul McCartney, subliminal. But so he's basically saying without hygiene of the mind, but hygiene of the mind is a imposition and a reconstruction, a reconfiguring, a premising of what you can think, what you can't think, etc. Gustav Le Bon, The Crowd, which is very much connected with this idea and the necessity of mental hygiene. The slave of all unconscious activity of his spinal cord, which the hypnotizer directs at will. The conscious personality has entirely vanished. Will and discernment are lost. Okay, so is that not the state of people that are either in the throes of the mass media spectacle, virtual reality, or those say you're following, you're a hardcore Deadhead, or you're hardcore into the punk scene, or whatever it may be, you the slave of the unconscious activity of his spinal cord. You're no longer your frontal cortex is basically out of commission in terms of having a conscious role or connection in directing your life, which is what it's supposed to do. So and then let's see, I think that's the last one. Yeah. So just real quick here, and
Sure.
and I didn't go into all the magical mystery tour stuff because I thought we could maybe do that another time. But anyways, the simulacrum. So the simulacrum is a copy without original. a representation without a real. Okay. A representation without a real. It is a model of something that in itself does not exist in reality, yet it purports to be a model of reality. Is not the psychedelic experience potentially just that, a simulacrum? You think you're connecting with nature, you think you're connecting with spirit, you think you go into this new amazing world, yet that world is a simulacrum. It is not the real world you're connecting with. You're connecting with this false or constructed uh, world that operates also on the subconscious, the collective ideation of the society. Society of the Spectacles. I've talked about this before, but so it's a very important idea. Sort of the derealization of actual objects in reality, their reality being sucked away, and Rilke talks about that also in doing elegies, how the objects are no longer real, right? When you make something, when you have something, there's a resonance, right? So there's, anyways, that's another topic. But Guy Debord is a great analyst, but he is a hardcore Marxist, and so he founded the Situationist International, which is a means to destabilize the society through doing these kind of situations, these events, these blending reality and fantasy, stepping into, creating, whether it's, acting. You can think of what's his name, the guy, the Borat dude, Cohen dude, yeah, Borat. So he's kind of an example of a
Somebody
situation.
just asked me to start watching him again. I watched a few of his things maybe a decade ago.
Yeah. But as I said, Gita Board has a lot of good theories, but his goal, Situation International, is to destroy the bourgeoisie idea of happiness, or the bougies idea of happiness. And bourgeoisie, what is that? Well, that's the middle class. That's basically the backbone of the society. It's not the very wealthy, and it's not the very poor. Although the lines for this keep getting redrawn. I mean, is it, look at the kulaks, right? The kulak peasants were wiped out in the Ukrainian Holodomor. At least 20, maybe 60 million killed. And they were peasants but they were autonomous farmers on the land. Is that what we mean by bourgeoisie? Perhaps. 1968 parent student revolt. Debord was also very influential in that, and that's and I hope I didn't talk too fast, but I'll go back into this stuff too. There's a lot more there, but
All right,
uh,
so pull this back together with the 10 directions and reality and pulling people back in.
yeah. So one thing that I've really been
Can you get a little closer to your mic,
sure,
please?
absolutely, yeah. So one thing I've really been focused on is creating a life or a way to really not only face everything, all circumstances, all situations, but also to start to, I think, a healing, to return to what we're meant to be as human beings, right? And so there's a lot of different aspects to this, but one thing that I've found to be a good sort of just a starting off point is this thing of the 10 directions and the 3 times. So we actually find this in semi-ancient, like Sanskrit, textbooks on geography. So it's not a religious term at all. But first of all, just think of your body, right? We have in front of you, behind you, to your right, to your left, and then there's also these cross or auxiliary. You say these corner directions, which are also important too, right? You think about that; they're kind of separate. These are the these other quadrants, right? The northeast, southeast, etc. And then the above and below. So, what are you standing on? What is the ground you're standing on? Where are you? Right? What's above you? Um, and that relates to drawing yourself back into the real world, not only by starting to just observe and just connect with your own body, just going back to that basic level, right? I mean, if it becomes zombie apocalypse, it's going to be You got to deal with this, right? Unless you got like an army behind you. I mean, it's really going to be you in the real world, not in the video game space. And so what's above you? Well, that's obviously just even being aware of what's above your physical space. What are you standing on? So then you realize, well, you're supported, right? You're supported by the earth. You're supported by a chair. But also what's below you? What's the foundation of your life? What do you almost take for granted that is actually founding your life? What is your ground? Is your ground perhaps not stable? Or maybe you need to change, right? And then what's above you, right? What are your aspirations? What is your higher self, or your the best part of yourself? But also what's above you? What rules you? What is influencing you? What is shaping or creating your experience? And so that's just something, even just by noticing that, just noticing these directions and really being aware of your body in the physical space, it's very good just to get as a tactical awareness, and really starting to get the sensory organs and your sense of your kinesthetic sense, and even that spatial sense of someone coming up behind you or next to you, or just knowing where you are and being able to read situations very quickly. But of course, the other thing to look at, though, is just starting to ground yourself and realizing how much of this stuff is we're not even aware of it, right? And then the 3 times, that's past, present, and future, right? So you talk about the power of the now. Let's live in the now, man. And to live in the now, yes, you can live in the now, but it's not that easy, because to really live in the now, you have to be completely present, and you also have to go through all the other things that are influencing you may not be aware of, right? There's all kind, your mind is going to wander here, there. You may have suppressed trauma, stress, anxiety, whatever. So just saying, oh, I'm going to live in the now. Well, of course you did. Now it's it's we're already in different nows, right? So, but just seeing yourself with this directional access, and in noticing the past, present, and the future. You're referencing the past. You are, yes, time is always moving, but you have your own past. You also have your own history. You have what you're connecting to as the history of your culture, your ancestors. You have, but you also have how you experience the flow of time. Are you so much caught up in trying to do your day-to-day, rat race, or texting, or Facebook, or sexting to Hunter Biden or something, and you're not really, your past is your present, because you're just in these chains of things. You're not really here in this world. You're in this thing, so you're actually constantly in the past of these messages, right? But we're always moving into the future, right? We have our futures that we could be afraid of. I have to go meet somebody, I have social anxiety, or we're all going to die of COVID. So that's an example of your relation to the future. But the future is also your horizons. It's like, what do you want for humanity, right? But it is centrally, what are you doing now, and what you're creating your future. You are on that timeline. So that's, to me, is how you get into the now. Then, because you cannot disgorge yourself of the past and the future, the present. I mean, you can maybe transcend that potentially, but you're not going to get there by having like a cut up film where, oh, I'm in the now, or I'm really happy, I'm partying and I'm taking ecstasy and I feel great, and I'm in the now. And then what's your future? What are you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah, what's
that's my
the
little
future
bridge.
that you're setting up with that behavior? 1, 2, 5, 10 years out. Does it lead anywhere? Are you pulling yourself back into reality, or are you calling reality a facade of the senses, and you need to believe in primacy of consciousness, where the world is only a reflection of you? You are not of the world. What is the most egoic thing that you can possibly believe? That you are of the world, or that the world is all a reflection of you? That we each have our own agency to act as ourselves, or everyone is just a mere reflection of you and nothing more. And so when we get out of that egoic sense that everything in the world is merely a reflection of ourselves, and that, reality is real, then we have to face the next step as well, that, well, if reality is real, then you, Hans, have your own agency, and everybody else has their own agency to act as they wish in that reality. And then it pulls us back out of that primacy of consciousness, partying, drugs, ecstasy, raves, ayahuasca, LSD, MKULTRA, Subproject 58, magic mushrooms, etc. And it makes us focus on what we are truly seeking, which is freedom. Is freedom in these drugs and blowing our minds, or is it establishing a way that we are actually independent in the future? Is it going and buying LSD from your, drug dealer, or is it learning how to hunt, or learning some skill that truly makes, or farm, etc., some skill that truly pulls you out of that, excuse the term, matrix, And,
Yeah.
And interestingly, hunting with my son last week, when you are out there, going through the bush and tracking a deer, you're in that here and now the whole time you're doing that. You don't have time to think of all this other stuff going on. You're tracking that animal. You're right there. You're living in the moment. You're paying attention to your surroundings. You're becoming one with that animal, learning to track it. Once you've tracked it and got it, then you're learning to, then you're hunting it. Then you're one with the animal, literally, as your arms are up inside of it, field dressing it. Then you're one with the animal and the reality, the here and now, when you're skinning it, when you're butchering it, when you're, putting all the cuts of meat in the freezer. All of these things pull you back to that reality. And then you can forecast, okay, well, is this something that's going to benefit my future? Is LSD going to benefit my future, or is having this supply of food and this knowledge of being able to be independent something that, as I went into it, okay, oh my God, I have to butcher this deer, and how do I do this? To now I've butchered a deer, and now I'm not afraid to do it again. Now I can get out there and do it again. Now I'm looking forward to elk season. Now I'm looking forward to quail season, etc. And that independence. And then every time you're out there actually in nature and understanding the cycle of life, that all life comes from death and it's this exchange, then you are in that moment of the here and now.
No, exactly. And so, one of the things is that, people are, well, have been, you're looking for this thing. Hey, there you go.
That's that's my son's first buck right there, shot a week ago today.
Well,
and having to learn even how to do this. And just to interrupt very quickly, and then I'll pass it back to you, the leftist would see this as some form of trophy, but this is actually the memory of this animal that put this food on the table, that you are not forgetting how it gave you life. You took its life so that it could give you life, and you didn't go to the store and get it out of a wrapper. We know exactly to the spot where this animal came from. After we took its life, we sat there and thanked it, and we prepared it. I mean, all of it was in that moment of the now.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that's a great point on, because that's a little bit what I'm saying, which I can, elaborate further. But when you're hunting, what I'm saying, that 10 directions of 3 times, right? That experience hunting, you're in that space. So that whole experience, in a sense, you are in the now, right? I mean, obviously you're there, but that is this connection, the things that are real, and actually being able to take care of yourself, to be able to make your own furniture, to be able to be self-sufficient, which used to be normal, right? And all these things, oh, it's recreation. And well, I feel so good when I do that. Well, I mean, it's not just taking LSD. It could be just, rushing after some kind of a corporate job, or just being caught up in stress, or lost in social media, or, subsumed in, negative dysfunctional relationships, or, you know, or caught in the, the pincers of the global new world order, satanic, alchemical control grid that's being erected as we speak. And just returning to where you are, and it just to be clear. And then that just helps, because how many things, people get into it if you really stop and think for a minute, wait, I don't necessarily need to do this. Or maybe I don't need to be so stressed out about stuff. And maybe I just want to connect with being a living human being without trying to be this person or that person, but just because that's ultimately comes down to it. You're on the land, you're on the earth. That's it, right? If you got nothing else, you have to, you're naked, you could still survive. You don't need all of this. But how many people can even enter into that space, which it's a challenge too, right? It's real. You're holding blood. You're actually facing death. You're not just tripping and reading the Book of the Dead. Oh,
Right.
I'm ready. And notice the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That is a manual that is recited to a person, to the body. After the person has actually died, they believe that the consciousness or soul is nearby the body. That's a manual that's read to the dead body. And you never know. There's other traditions that it is possible that the person's some of the person's energy is there after death, but it's used as a manual for inner exploration. What's that going to do? What are you going to get caught in the Bardos, the hell realm? You're going to, it's a manual for deconstructing the mind, giving children tools that don't have the strength to survive on their own, that are from cushy suburban households that think electricity and food and water and cars all just manifest, right? Tripping, getting back to Nature of the Dead show, you got to go, oh, you lose your car keys. Oh, suddenly, it's not so natural anymore, is it, bro?
Well, let me read. Okay, so Professor Neil Whitehead, he was like the 6th guest I ever had in December 2008, I believe. So 12 years ago, nearly. He died, 10 years ago or so. But he wrote, shamanism is a burgeoning obsession for the middle classes around the globe. Its presentation in popular books, TV specials, and on the internet is dominated by the presumed psychic and physical benefits that shamanic techniques can bring. This heightened interest has required a persistent purification of the ritual practices of those who inspire the feverish quest for personal meaning and fulfillment. Ironically, given the self-improvement motivations that have brought so many into popular understanding of shamanism, two defining aspects of shamanism in Amazonia, blood, i.e. violence, and tobacco, have simply been erased from such representations. Such erasure is not only a vain self-deception, but more important, it is a recapitulation of colonial ways of knowing, through both the denial of radical cultural difference and a refusal to think through its consequences.
Well, I don't know so much it's colonial as either, because, someone, in academia, I have some like really expensive academic research stuff I've done that's available. The books are like $500 or something. So
well, he's talking about really like, and he lived with the Kanema, the dark shamans in Amazon. He was a victim of a Kanema attack, whitewashed into this neo-shamanic, pseudo-shamanic nonsense that the middle class people follow today that they think is real shamanism. And it's totally removed from that, and and so therefore he's arguing it's it's in that sense, it's the same as the, colonial measures of the conquest of the Amazonia in the first place.
Yeah, no, I wanted just to, what I was going to get to is that, this is actually Boasian anthropology, which talks about cultural relativism, right? Then you have Margaret Mead, and a lot of the work, like Alan Lomax, which came up with the scale, which this guy actually Alan Lomax was a genius. I mean, his Cantometrics is an amazing system because he created this numerical classification of all these different features of music and tied them in with particular social organizations like a tribe, a this, a that. He had, and it's, and then you've got, Margaret Mead, of course, became part of cybernetics, et cetera, et cetera. So, and so this idea of a quote unquote premising the other, but also to deliberately promote that, to promote this. There can be, you call whitewashing. I think it's engaged from the Boasian anthropology because, and then also this idea of, oh, well, we can't appear to be too harsh on the natives. We may be criticized. And I think maybe the higher ups, like shadowy figures like Mead or Bateson, and people, now are
Native
going to be
revivalism.
they're going to be setting the trend. And if you want to work, you want to publish, if you want, if you want to fit in, or if you want to join the happy dream, then get into shamanism. And it's another long way around to what you what you basically want. When we talked about this over the phone, I said that the shamanism, go outside, look at this earth, your body, your bones. You're going to go into the earth. Your minerals. You're part of this earth. Look at the sun. There's your element. Look at the water. Look at the trees. Start to feel that. Connect with nature. Connect with your body. Connect with that. There's your shamanic experience. If you're open to it enough and also able to get past all the inner noise or all these other things, right, that to a certain extent have been programmed into people, not being able to accept yourself, thinking something's wrong with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or just not being able to actually see where you are because you're so disembodied. You're so much on the magic bus in the virtual world that you can't do that. Let me just real quick, I want to share this article here. And there's other cases of this, but this is an example of these like deadhead murders. And so there's this documentary on it, which I'll have to check out. But there's other stories, a tragic case, so many unanswered questions, but there's other examples of this. I haven't seen a documentary. I'm going to think it may be a kind of a limited hangout, a whitewash, but also a way to reintroduce the Grateful Dead to the collective psyche, right? I mean, it's a way to get new people interested, to be attracted. Look at that symbolism, right? Look at that, the back of the bus there with the skull and the flowers and the Rosicrucian and other types of mystery schools they're involved with. So I'll stop that. But so that's and then like the Beatles, I didn't get into the whole Crowleyan thing. I think that the Crowleyan connection with the Beatles is slightly overemphasized. The really important one is the process church. The process church connection is central. And Crowleyanism is, it's OTO, it's this, but the process church, where which is actually a Gnostic, it's an ancient Gnostic heresy, where there's a permanent evil. Evil is just as powerful as good. The universe has both permanent evil and permanent good, and they're just balanced. Okay. And that's why in the process church, as you get into it further, on the surface looks Christian, and then you worship both Christ and Satan at the same time because they're on the same team. And then from there, you end up really pretty, fucked in the head. I had to swear there. I did that deliberately. And so let me just play a couple audio clips here And I had this huge collection of all the source material of all the guys in the dead talking in a sort of unguarded moment. So this is Owsley, and I'm just going to play this on my laptop, and hopefully this will be audible.
Well, if you can't describe what you were doing with acid before, can you describe what was different about what the Kesey outfit was doing with it?
Well, it was magic. It took you into a place that was like the descriptions in the books by the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, and it made sense of all the different occult things that I'd read. It was the introduction to magic. It was a pathway to another place, and it seemed to give you access to mental powers that were written about and talked about, both amongst the Hindus and amongst the ancient alchemists.
I
don't want to get dinged if somebody plays too much of that.
Oh, this is not copyrighted.
Access to those
All right.
things is a tool.
No, this is public domain.
Consciousness. Although the material always gave me great visions, incredible visions. I'm sure that it's the root source of the art that I do, even today. I'm sure it was the root source of my ability to manipulate sound, which I looked at as an art form. I never looked at myself as an engineer anymore, and I looked at myself as a chemist or anything else. Not a scientist. I have a scientific background because I'm interested in everything. And science is just a way of describing the physical universe. And alchemy and the occult is just a way of describing the non-physical universe. And I was interested in both aspects. Art is a way of creating something yourself as a man, which can say something about either the physical, the non-physical, or both.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, so he kind of called out it was magic, and he pronounced it very clearly, magic, not like, oh, my girlfriend and I had a magical evening, listening to Kenny G. No, this is magic with the K, as in occult ritual working. And he says, what examples does he use? Does he say, oh, it's like, the great cloud of unknowing, these great Christian mystics? No, he says Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry and occult. And he says, my powers come from these occult sources. And he basically lays it out right there. And he goes, and he says that he calls it the outfit. He doesn't say the social movement, an outfit. What's an outfit? Like an outfit, like a battalion? The term outfit, it's a business, maybe a business, but, outfit has a connotation of almost being like a military unit, an experimental psychological warfare unit. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, it's, he's very direct and straight to the point right there, what it's all about. It's about the left-hand path and the occult and Crowleyan-style satanic magic, sabotage Zevi, all of that stuff. It's very clear, but that's what the dead were.
Yeah. And I'm just going to play one last little clip here. So this is Jerry Garcia in 1992 talking about transhumanism. Okay. And so here's Jerry talking about transhumanism. And this is a big, he's a man of the people. He is on our side. Jerry's going to set us free.
Oh, yeah. He's going to set us free as Uncle Sam playing in a rock and roll band.
Yeah. So I'll just play this real quick.
Beings anatomically for several 100,000 years, wandering around, hunting and gathering, and then suddenly, at the same time, they started painting in caves. Right. They started multiplying. So what this paleontologist that I quoted has the theory that the first art in caves were really psychedelic experiences. Yeah. And the reason that they were is so that, because the tribal encyclopedia, the amount of information that people needed to know in order to move to a new way of life,
Right.
suddenly increased.
That's right. Yeah, that's
So
a
how
good,
do you
that's a
get
good
that?
notion. Yeah, the point is there's more information now than you can pass along comfortably in an oral tradition. Say a strictly speaking culture has a problem.
Nobody's delineating. Nobody's concentrating.
Right.
There's a lot of extraneous stuff, like for instance the satellites that measure the atmosphere.
Yeah.
There's billions and billions and billions of bytes of data, only maybe 2% of which are actually useful. They don't know what the rest are for. They don't know what good they
That's
are.
right.
But
People want to
they're
fly
there.
through that.
Fill up tanks and things.
Yeah.
And anyway, who knows for sure how complex or how
Hold on, I'm going to crank it up here a little bit because people are saying they're not hearing it. Or are you done there?
Oh shit.
All right, I'm going to crank up your volume all the ways just so people can hear that better.
They weren't. I mean, if you look at some of these cultures,
complex or how uncomplex the ancient people's lives were. They may have been in many ways as absolutely full and complicated as anything in this.
I don't think there's any reason to assume they weren't. I mean, if you look at some of these cultures now, and there's still a few of them.
No, that's true. See, but that's what I mean about the singularity.
Yeah.
Is that the entire human race faced a singularity when one small group discovered technology.
Right.
We can.
Yeah, it goes on. Basically, I know it's a little bit confusing. I'll just kind of summarize. They talk about hunter-gatherer, how men lived as thousands of years as hunter-gatherers. And how did we evolve? By taking psychedelics.
Right.
Cave art.
Well, and
Right.
that's just like Terrence McKenna's BS stoned ape theory that was heavily promoted by guys like Joe Rogan, and then you start looking into it and it's completely nonsense. And McKenna fudged his citations to guys like, who was it, Roland Fisher or something like that. He totally faked the citations and misquoted Fisher to make his arguments about visual acuity and all this stuff, which ended up being completely nonsense.
Yeah, and then I, again, apologize it wasn't more clear, but at the end, he they're talking about this, okay, and then the tribal encyclopedia, how much information they had to transfer, and then they mentioned satellites with billions and billions of I think it said megabytes back in the early 90s, megabytes of data, but then from there they shift to no one can comprehend or have all this information. There was a singularity in the cave when they did mushrooms or whatever. The new singularity is the singularity, which is what is commonly known by, which is the fusion of man and machine, where we become immortal technological beings permanently encased in, maybe not immortal, but we basically become fused with computers and machines. And that's what he's saying is the next phase of human evolution. And they go on and on about it. I'm not going to play all these things, but I mean, so they're right there. They're talking about, look at their narrative, right? Oh, so instead of trying to connect, he's still kind of pushing them aside. Oh, we lived for thousands of years, as, hunter gatherers. And then suddenly we evolved. How? Psychedelics. Oh, okay. And then now what's our new, and that's what, he says later on, LSD, virtual reality is a new LSD. And I hope they don't set up an FBI task force to stop people from doing virtual reality. Yeah, Jerry, like they're going to like, oh dude, I'm going to bust you for your VR glasses. But he said, and you see, it's completely fused. It is the same thread, which goes to completely controlled. Everything you do is monitored. Your body is, electronically influenced, whether externally or through implanted devices.
Right. Well,
your mind, you instead of having your brain burn out from LSD or be psychologically confused, you can heal from that. But once you're locked into the cyborg matrix, like those guys, as Lego people, taking DMT and going to the virtual Burning Man, which is, there you go. There's your virtual Burning Man. There's Jerry's dream come true. That's our human future right there. That is what, at least according to Jerry and according to the Beatles and according to our current masters of reality, that's what's happening. So.
And so it was members of the Merry Pranksters, including, Well, Dorothy Fadiman's husband, James Fadiman, whom I had on the show many years ago, he helped invent the computer mouse. Timothy Leary was heavily promoting virtual reality before his death. Who's the other guy I'm trying to think of that basically was behind the invention of computers? We talked to him about Stuart Brand. And so, these guys were heavily involved, in SRI, Stanford Research Institute, was heavily involved not only in MKUltra and promoting all of this pseudo-shamanism garbage, but also promoting the virtual reality and technocracy, etc. So, it always ends up tying right back to this group of people here, along with Aldous Huxley and some of these other people, but it's always this same group of people that we end up right back at when we follow these rabbit holes. But here's Stuart Brand, one of the top merry prankster guys, who was also behind the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He did the electric Kool-Aid acid tests. He was behind computer creation, etc. So so here's Stanford Research Institute here, heavily involved. Cybernetics ties in there. We see James Fadiman involved in MKUltra. He did the last legal LSD test. Dr. Andrea Puharich involved in MKUltra. Joseph Campbell involved in MKUltra. He was also at the Maverick Society in Woodstock, promoting Do What You Want To, while Aleister Crowley was out on the rocks of Esopus Island saying, Do What Thou Wilt is the whole of the law. And then, so all of these guys tie into this same little nexus. But so we end up with this, what's going on here? My brain program apparently just crashed, but we end up with this nexus of these guys who are involved with the Merry Pranksters, with MKUltra, with the Stanford Research Institute, with Aldous Huxley, and all of this kind of stuff. So let's see, technocracy. I don't have them tied into here. I should put more of them. Club of Rome, interestingly, Rianne Eisler, who worked with Terence McKenna, ties in right there, as does H.G. Wells and eugenics, population control, etc. And here's the Tavistock Institute. But Rianne Eisler did one of these long BS talks about how patriarchal society is evil and all of this stuff, and to promote all of this humanistic ideology. And then here's cybernetics. Here's Gregory Bateson, one of the co-founders of the CIA, who is also behind MKUltra. His wife Margaret Mead, whom we talked about earlier during the show. Always the same damn group of people tied into this stuff. And Gregory Bateson coined native revivalism, which is their promotion of neo-shamanic nonsense to people today, thinking that shamanism is to work on your inner self, and this nonsense, like some of the someone in the chat earlier was saying, which we've already spent a decade at this point debunking. But I recommended those people go back and check out all of the earlier shows where we expose this stuff. But technocracy, virtual reality, Stuart Brand, the Merry Pranksters, Ken Kesey, Tim Leary. It's the same agenda, repackaged a little bit differently. It's Aldous Huxley's Final Revolution, where it will be the last time that the bourgeoisie rise up against the elite, and they want the ultimate socialist, mind-controlled society that no one ever rises up against. And so the psychedelics cause hypersuggestion. They are suggestogens. They don't free anybody's mind. They promote mind control.
Oh yeah, and the methodologies. I mean, I would, you've got, Norbert Wiener. I mentioned like Alan Turing. He actually developed like kind of the first sort of prototype model of the computer, used like the code cracker. He was connected with, William S. Burroughs, and William S. Burroughs, but then you go back from there and you go back from there. And so you see certain people are out there that are coming up. You go back to Kurt Lewin. I mean, he was very, very important. I mean, because he kind of known as a management guru, but he actually at that psychological topology is a way to look at these group dynamics and these patterns of conditioning, just as the guy out in Canada. I just forgot his name. The guy that like drove all the LSD testing.
Oh goodness! At shoot.
I know that's not a good thing. I know off the top of my head. It's like the most basic thing. It's like
Yeah. Well, what was that? Allen Memorial Institute.
yeah.
Here we go. Let me just pull it up right here. Ewan Cameron.
Ewan Cameron. So Ewan Cameron's early work, or some of his work, that's not available now. I mean, I've never been able to find it. He talked about this idea of insanity as a contagion that can be spread. And one of the examples he talks about is the use of music played by people that are insane to spread madness in sort of a viral or social form. So, there's a lot of things, like I said, the psychological topology, because that's all mathematically modeled. You put that in with cybernetics, you put it in with cybersyn, the idea of this, sort of, that's like the first smart city, and more just as William Beer is more just, I think like a ritual. I think it was probably kind of a Star Trek like joke, but it was setting that in the mind. It was like a ritual enactment, with Salvador Allende in Chile. And then another side is that a lot of these people, you find that they're part of types of occult groups or practices or whatever. Sometimes not publicly, but for example, the Illuminates of Thanatos, right? So this is like a kind of a secret society that's connected with chaos magic, with some people from even the Grateful Dead, but also William S. Burroughs. There's a lot. I won't get into all this, but there's a lot of these things that these people were involved in. What is it behind this? It's this desire to create the final, perfect, controlled world where those who believe they are the ascended masters, they are beyond God, right? They're using, whether it's science, because science is just a new form of magic in a certain way, right? And whatever, I'm not saying this is real or not, but I'm just saying that this is what it started out with. And this goes back even to that thing. It's not even some of that, the Khilafat, which I talked about before, where there's this mirror image of the tree of life, right? The tree of death.
Correct.
And these are employed. This stuff is there. Look at all the numerology around Corona, blah, blah, blah. So all these things are being constantly enacted. And obviously they have some kind of symbolic resonance, but more importantly, they have ritual resonance for this unfolding of this system, which has been laid out, for hundreds, if not thousands of years as a dream that, even with the virtual reality, there's different stages. You have your kind of virtual 3D glasses, this has also been rolled out. This stuff from Jerry is like 1991, 92. You can imagine how crap the virtual reality stuff was. You've seen Larry, he puts them on, he's like, oh my God, I'm in ecstasy. It's just, total crap, because
Right.
that's not even like, Tron, not even like Pac-Man level graphics. But all I'm saying is that it is all connected, but I think it's incumbent also to see in what ways we ourselves are influenced, or not even seeing that, just try to return to your base level in a positive way. I'm not talking like, hit rock bottom, end up in the gutter drinking scotch. Hey, Jan, can you give me a dollar?
If you're in the gutter, you wouldn't be drinking scotch, Hans.
That's okay.
You'd be drinking Night Train or some crap.
Hey, Jan,
So-
can you give me a dollar?
Yeah,
Good
can you get me a $120 bottle of 18-year-old scotch? Hey, so I wanted to speak directly to Gary Kelly in the audience here tonight, and he's brought up some points. He's arguing that shamanism is for the self-healment and blah, 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 and he's also saying, he says, quote, I would say the opposite. Psychedelics actually was the spawn of the protest movement against the war and civil rights. That's actually incorrect. Hans and I have shown in 48 shows now, as well as I've written extensive articles on this, psychedelics were literally and directly promoted by the CIA as MKUltra. That is the real MKUltra, is the counterculture movement. You have guys like John D. Marks who put out the bogus misdirection research on Search for the Manchurian Candidate. You have Acid Dreams and all of this stuff where they say, oh, the hippies thwarted the CIA's actions and drugs landed on the street and stopped the CIA's agenda and thwarted their whole effort and everything. That's the agenda. That's the narrative that the CIA wants you to believe, because if you realize that the psychedelic drugs were in fact MKUltra, as I've exposed in the articles that I linked to you in the chat, then you break free from that. R. Gordon Wasson, for instance, I exposed over many years, was in charge of MKUltra Subproject 58. He's, of course, the guy who promoted magic mushrooms, psilocybe and amanita mushrooms, etc., to the public. He was running MKUltra Subproject 58 for the government, working directly with guys like Aldous Huxley. He worked directly with Timothy Leary, etc. These people promoted these agendas not to free you. It wasn't a spawn of the protest movement, as you claim there, but it was directly to mind control through hypersuggestion the population. And if you take the time to read those articles that I sent you, I think you'll see that they're correct. They're almost entirely based on primary citations that you can seek out yourself and verify that information and get yourself free of that psychedelic and that shamanic mindset, because it's a dead end. It will get you nowhere, and that's why Hans and I did this episode tonight called The Magical Mystery Tour for the 12th anniversary of the show. And I've literally been trying to break people free of this mindset for a decade now. So I pray and hope that you take the time to study that and digest it. And it may take you about 6 months or so, but you'll see in the end that it is, in fact, MKUltra, and get yourself free of that. So that's all I had to say. Hans, are you done for the night? You have anything to add there?
No, I just want to give out my website.
Okay.
It's hansutter.com, and I have a blog. It's mindcontrolmusic.wordpress.com, and I've got a whole members area, but I've got to get it online functioning. So anybody does web design, man, hit me up or whatever. And I have some CDs and books, and I give great back rubs. As long as you're blonde and under 25. No, I'm just kidding.
He's actually, let Joe Biden sniff his ear and hair and stuff too. I'm kidding. You know what? Speaking of that, I could use a web designer as well for help on the LogosMedia website. And so I would appreciate that. Also, LogosMedia.com. Please support the show. We can't do it without all of your support. And please hit the like and subscribe. Please spread this episode. Thank you so much, everyone in the audience, for 12 years of tuning in. That's a long milestone. I never suspected I would still be doing this when I started this on October 28th, 2008. And when I started this show, I was actually in favor of psychedelics and all of this stuff, and we've done so much research over the years, including with Hans here, who's been on for a decade now, exposing how it was all false. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Good night. Thanks for tuning in. Again, please support the show, and see you next time.
Hey, I just want to throw one thing out there. I want to read this. This is about 25-page passage. No, I'm just kidding. I want to say about shamanism, you're looking at something. So you're looking for a type of experience, right? Or you're looking for maybe a type of a grounding. So, you can go out in the woods. You can sit there and with your mind and body, just start to connect with nature. You can talk to trees. You can hug trees. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. You can try to just imagine yourself as part of this living world and just connect with life as it is. That's a type of shamanism, at least as I would see it as the positive aspect. Connect with nature. Get the feeling of like what it's like being a raging lion or whatever. I mean, we can resonate with these things in nature. We can. But you don't need to go and do ayahuasca, and it was some, probably some, rapist or extremely evil, dark shaman in Peru. You don't need to take a drug that could potentially make you insane the rest of your life or get astral entities attached to your body and you end up possessed or whatever, or just become you're just looking for the next high. And that is the problem with psychedelics. You can use them. People have great experiences. You experience this higher state of consciousness. What's positive is a state of connection. You feel that. You occasionally, if you're not, at a rock show,
you might have that experience a couple times, and then you spend time trying to get back to it, and you never do.
And I liken it to, you want to go to you want to go to Las Vegas, you want to go to Peru, and you watch a video about going to Peru. Oh, that looks really cool. Well, the psychedelic state, whatever it's showing you of your higher potentials, is like you watching it on a TV screen compared to you actually going there. But that means to get there, you have to get in great physical shape. It's not, you know what I mean? You're not trying to blow your mind. You're trying to become as grounded, as healthy, as, as emotionally strong, as honorable, as, compassionate person you can be. And so while you'll get a state out of it, this last thing here, one of the things that happens with psychedelic usage is, even if you don't have this thing of depersonalization, which really messes people up because it's really invisible, right? Many people suffer from this, and you call it perma-tripping, right? And it's something where you can live on the surface of normal life, but that's always going to be there unless you're able to go over it. But one of the basic effects of psychedelics is that it starts to separate you from your actual day-to-day life. It starts to create a schism. It starts to create two variegated sort of life worlds that go increasingly apart the more you want to keep taking LSD to continue your spiritual and healing journey. So you end up separating more and more of yourself from the real world. And eventually that can go into depersonalization or derealization, but it has a profound effect on your own psychic integration and your own ability to really develop to who and what you are. So, you could have a great trip and say, man, it changed my life. If you keep doing it, you're going to potentially destroy your life. But I think it also, unless you're strong enough to overcome it, can weaken certain things in your consciousness or mind. It can allow you to be influenced. It can also keep you locked into the past, right? How about all these people that keep listening to the same classic rock tunes? Oh. They're caught in this mind loop. Which is a cybernetic systems theory. And it's potentially possible that the use of LSD was tied in with cybernetic systems to create these types of social movements and create these types of cognitive loops on an individual and mass scale that we're witnessing the fruition of them right now. And I wish everybody the best. Thank you so much, Jan. And I think it was a cool show. I think we covered a lot of information, and it was great how we're just able to, just connect a lot of stuff. And I think the work we did is still important because it's still relevant. it's
I think
probably
it's
more.
more relevant today than it probably was over the last decade when we put it out, you know?
Yeah. And one last thing, so people don't call me a hater. I mean, when we did our first show, we were both into psychedelics, right?
Right. Well, yeah. And look how, you know,
Yeah. Oh
wow,
man.
boy. Yeah. I can't even imagine that anymore. It's just such nonsense in hindsight. But anyway, to Gary and to everybody in the audience, please check out those articles on my website if you're still in doubt. Entheogens, What's in a Name? Is one of the main articles, The Untold History of Psychedelic Spirituality, Social Control, and the CIA, how they literally promoted psychedelic spirituality under the MKUltra program. And then the other article is Spies in Academic Clothing, The Untold History of MKUltra and the Counterculture, and how the intelligence community misleads the 99%. I'm also working on another article. I need to get it done. I've been working on it for way too long, but and then I'm going to shut up here and we'll go. But it's called Teonanacatl. And let me just pull that up here. Oh, boy. Teonanacatl, Flesh of the Gods, Teonanacatl and the Aztec Mushroom Death Cult. And when you go back and you look at all the original Aztec citations that were published by Friar Sahuagin in the late 1500s, etc., and Diego Duran, etc., all of the original people that put the Aztec reports together, and you compared them to what people like Gordon Wasson and Professor Carl Ruck and these clowns promoted, you can see that they entirely distorted the original citations and took them out of context for this false CIA religion that they created. Even Maria Sabina herself came out against all of it and said that before Gordon Wasson, nobody used the drugs or the mushrooms to find God, that they were only to treat local sicknesses that the Mazatec suffered from. So anyway, I'm going to end it there. And once again, good night. Thank you. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.